Hello.
Yeah. Hi, sorry, Amy's having some issues with her audio, so we're just working through it right here.
Yeah, I'm having issues with the video too. I can't even see you guys. Can you guys see me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Well, right now you're frozen, and no, it says you're connecting to audio.
Yeah, it happened to me this morning. It's the only thing I can think of is restarting my computer.
Okay. Sorry, ladies, Amy's computer is not allowing her to enter into the Zoom meeting. So she's gonna restart it so that we can hopefully get her in here.
And so this is why we start 15 minutes early.
It's true, that's why we get on early. So she's restarting her computer right now.
So I'm wondering if the PowerPoint is an issue. Oh, they look lovely.
They do, you guys do look great. Oh, I think Anjua, you might be frozen. Oh, there you go. You're good now.
Hi, Tracy.
Hi, it's so nice to meet you this way.
Nice to meet you as well.
Someday we should get to meet all the people that we've met over Zoom since March. We can have a big party somewhere. But it's an honor to be sharing this time with you.
Oh, so this is going to be a really great way for me to introduce this topic. I'm serious. So I got this.
Sarah, do you need Sarah?
Yeah.
Do you need me to be doing anything else? Are we good?
No, you're good. You guys both look great. You sound good.
Paperwork. Okay, everything's okay.
Yep.
All right. Good, thanks.
I might have you break out the PowerPoint also, just in case.
Yeah, I have it. I have the script and the PowerPoint.
Okay, I have the script. PowerPoint is not there. Oh, there we go. Meeting is going on. Should I see your Zoom meeting?
Oh, the PowerPoint. I was like, whoa, what's going on? Can you launch it through the Zoom on your computer?
Try.
Oh, no, it's not working either. You're not on Wi-Fi, you're on regular.
All right.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
now I can't even get the, now I can't even get the, internet.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's coffee shop. We're so happy that you're here with us. Today's topic, we're going to be talking about resilience, both in our mental and physical health for nonprofit professionals. If you could just do us a quick favor and either wave or say a quick hello in the chat, just to make sure that you can hear us and that you can see us. All right, I see some hands raised. That's awesome. So thank you for that. I do have a little story of my own resilience before we get started today. So, you know, always, it doesn't matter how many times that you do something, always something can get a wrench thrown in it. And so today's wrench was not being able for me to actually get on our Zoom webinar until about 2 minutes ago. And so I think this topic is going to be very timely for me personally, as I hear both Tracy and Anjua talk about just being able to take a breath and think through adversity. So, but again, thank you for coming to our .org coffee shop today. This is actually part of our .org cafe series, which is really about nonprofit professional development through a series of webinars, e-newsletters, and also just other content through blogs that we push out over the course of the year. Really, the whole idea behind .org Cafe is to provide free education to those in the nonprofit sector, which is something that we at .org feel very, very strongly about. Really, the focus and the format of our webinars, for those of you who are new to our webinars, is really meant to be informative but relatable. So we're going to be having just really a conversation with our panelists today. And I think you're going to be very excited to hear what they have to say. I've been excited talking to them about the topic today, and I think it's really relevant for what many of us are going through. So just quickly, a few housekeeping items. The format of the webinar is going to be me as a moderator. I'm Amy Wong, and I'm president of .org Solutions, and then both of our panelists. We also have Sarah Lunenberger from our .org team who will be monitoring the chat box. Only the panelists and the moderator will be visible on the call today. So those of you who may have questions, please make sure that you put them either in the Q&A section or the chat box, and we will make sure to address those as we go along through the webinar today. We will also have time at the end of the webinar today, about 5 to 10 minutes that we'll reserve for additional questions. So if you want to wait until the end, that's great. But if you have something that you want to ask as we're covering a particular topic, please feel free to do that, and we will answer those along the way. Thank you to those of you who submitted questions ahead of time. We've integrated those into today's session, so thank you for those. And we just want to make sure that if you have any issues hearing us or seeing us, please again put that in the chat box today. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started because for those of you who are on time, I think we should start on time for you. So really anyone who has worked in the nonprofit sector understands that resilience is just kind of part of what we have to do. So not only do we have our own challenges in the workplace, but we're often dealing with the challenges that are handed to us in other ways. So we may have small budgets, we may have donor fatigue, we may have a pandemic, we may have limited staff, and to top it all off, we in many cases have increased demands for services, all right now, which require a lot of resilience on all parts. But many of us watch those obstacles of our clients or patients and see what they have to do to survive, and that motivates us, but also can really put a little bit of, or a bit of added stress onto us. So, but again, now we throw a pandemic in and things are a whole new meeting. So today is our first in a 3-part series on resilience. We're going to be talking today with our panelists, Anjua Maximo, who is an entrepreneur and a life movement coach, and Dr. Tracy Yaeger, who is a psychologist and president CEO of Portage Path Behavioral Health. They are going to provide insight to us today on the impact of the pandemic on our mental and physical health, and just kind of give us some ways that we can manage both of those, both at home and in the workplace. So before we get started with our questions, I do want to introduce you to our speakers, who are both wonderful ladies, and I think have just such wonderful experience that they're going to be able to share with you. Our first panelist is Anjua Maximo, and she's been helping women cultivate self-love for more than 10 years. Her first introduction to sensual embodiment work was in LA in 2006 while working as a lead instructor for Sheila Kelly's S Factor Studios. That work was the perfect precursor to her learning about goals, vision, and personal growth work, and she quickly saw that connecting women to their sensuality and their purpose were key to sparking our feminine genius. For those guys that are on this call, I'm sure there's a lot of relevant things that Anjua is going to be able to talk about that are going to be good for you as well. So please don't let that make you anxious. In 2015, Anjua received her certificate in life coaching from the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. She went on to create Pure Movement and Electric Life Coaching, which are two of her current offerings. And when she isn't busy with her coaching clients, she's helping run Groove Ride, which is Cleveland's premier boutique micro gym that she and her husband Zosimo opened 5 years ago. Groove Ride currently has 2 locations and boasts a team of 40 amazing individuals, and both Zos and Anjua affectionately dubbed the Heart and Hustle team. Anjua attributes her success as a coach and an entrepreneur to heart-centered leadership, vision, values, and a strong company culture. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Tracy Yaeger. Tracy is a psychologist and president and CEO of Portage Path Behavioral Health. She has more than 30 years of experience in community behavioral health with expertise in clinical treatment, staff development, hiring, team building, professional training, and leadership. Prior to being appointed president in January 2017, Tracy was vice president and director of clinical services at Portage Path, overseeing clinical operations and services for 25 years. She has designed and built clinical programming, incorporating best practices, implemented efficient and effective access to care models for outpatient and crisis settings. Tracy is also a clinical assistant professor in psychiatry at Northeast Ohio Medical University and holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology from State University of New York at Albany, a Master's of Arts in Psychology from Marist College, and a doctorate in psychology from the University of Akron. Welcome today, ladies. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our first question today. And before we even go into the topic of resilience, I think it's really important for us to talk about what are we seeing right now in terms of mental and physical health in the workplace as we're navigating this pandemic. Tracy, how about we start with you?
Thank you for asking me to join in today, Amy. Just a privilege to be here. I know we have a lot of information, and between Anjua and I, we're going to pretty much cover this topic. So I'm excited to get started. So COVID, of course, has had a tremendous impact on everyone at all levels in the workplace. While people worry about losing their jobs, your staff, your teams are concerned about a number of things, leaders have been overwhelmed and really stressed to the max. You know, we are looking at rapid fire decision making, severely interrupted routines. There's very serious fiscal and economic hardships, and also just the great unknown. And all these things are definitely impacting mental health. If you think to people in your own workspace or people in the community, relatives, friends, people are highly anxious. They really feel a lack of control at this point. I see some people even moving into some learned helplessness, which is, of course, likely to spiral into some depression. We're just always continually operating on high alert, it seems. So with all the typical traditional things of being nonprofit leaders and navigating our professional and personal lives, this pandemic has really turned some things upside down.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are feeling that way, and it's kind of nice to, I guess, maybe nice to know that we're not alone, right?
Not alone.
So Anjua, I mean, we know that, you know, mentally we're kind of struggling, but I think sometimes when we're doing that physically, we may start to neglect ourselves as well. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, owning obviously Groove Ride, you know, both as an entrepreneur and then someone who is at the studio and, you know, seeing my clientele diminish greatly, obviously for people's fear of coming into public spaces. But what I was hearing, unfortunately, too, was that sometimes, you know, they're not even picking up exercise at home, as some of them did transition to at-home workouts. A lot of people have just not felt inspired to do anything, you know, which, of course, you know, if you're someone who used physical fitness as a means of a mental release, you know, even a spiritual release, and now you kind of drop that. And there's nothing there to replace it. There's just a feeling of, Tracy has said it before, a hopelessness. I'm hearing a lot of, well, when will it end? People constantly looking towards the end. And I think what that's causing is, like she said, anxiety, because they're not present to what they can be doing now about it. So my concern definitely is seeing my clients, stop some of their usual routines, not looking to kind of reinvent them or create new ones for themselves, neglecting their health. And I think in the beginning, we all did it a little bit. We're home, we're in lockdown, so there's a lot of comfort eating going on and maybe some comfort drinking, a little extra. But then at some point, when we looked at this is not going to be ending anytime soon, we have to start to transition and look to say, okay, well, then how are we going to start taking care of ourselves? So that's what I'd like to see people doing more. And I'm not seeing enough of that just yet.
So one of the things, Anjua, when you and I were talking that I thought was really interesting was that, you said people are having a hard time setting goals for next year. And I thought you made just a really interesting point about goal setting and the unknown. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, that's one of the things I specialize in when I'm working with my coaching clients is setting goals. And what I heard repeatedly was, well, I can't set any goals. I don't know what's going to happen next year. I don't know, if I'm going to have a job. I don't know if A, B, and C is going to be happening because of this pandemic. I don't know if I'll be able to travel. So how do I set goals when there's so much that I don't know? And, my gentle pushback has been, when have you ever really known what's going to happen though? Right. So I get it. I understand that things seem more mysterious, seem more unobtainable right now. But if you really put things in perspective, you don't ever really know if you're going to have your job next year. So if anything, I'm not saying attack it the same way that we normally would. We can definitely take into consideration things like COVID and the pandemic and how we all are living and the uncertainty we're living in. But it doesn't mean we have to stop creating possibly just a new vision for ourselves. And that's when I talk mostly about not getting too attached to the actual outcome or, the title, but looking more so at the essence of the goal, because the essence can be put into possibly something else. So just a little bit more flexibility around it.
So, we may be having, the feelings that Tracy had talked about. We may be, feeling disconnected, not understanding, what our goals should be. We may not be taking care of ourselves. But at the same time, we're being told, be resilient, be strong, push through, we're going to get there. What actually does that really mean? And Tracy, I'm going to ask you first what that means in terms of our mental health right now. And if we're being told we need to be resilient, we don't really understand what that means. What does that do to us mentally? And what are some things that we can do to kind of help us through that?
The first thing I want to comment on is really key the way that you said this and asked this question, Amy. Yeah, people are telling us that we should be resilient. So we need to stop that right now and really, really think about who's telling who to do what, because it only adds to the stress and anxiety of people putting more pressure on everybody that you should be able to do things and we must and whatever. But in resiliency, in the world of resilience, there is a lot of things that are very, very helpful for people right now. People do talk a lot about it, and it's very it would be helpful to recognize that resilience is basically just a collection of skills. So it generally includes things like an ability to recover from setbacks. So being able to maybe learn and thrive from things that don't go your way or unmet goals. I don't like to use the word, but failures are a reality to all of us. So sometimes if you experience those things and you're able to really recover from that, you have built into your skill set some things that you can go and use in your toolbox right now, which is really helpful. Another thing is persistence, the ability to keep going in the face of adversity or big challenges. Sometimes we all get fatigued, but being able to kind of pull that persistence up really helps you to build your resilience skills. I think Anjua already mentioned it, the word flexibility. Probably between her and I, we're probably going to use it 1,000 times in the next few minutes, but really embracing change and being flexible being able to adapt well to change is very, very important to being resilient. You know, life is going to happen. You know, we can set goals, and I always used to, you know, in doing treatment with folks who are providing care, we'd set goals and then we'd say life happens. So I think that's what's supposed to happen when you set some goals. Life happens and kind of gets in the way. But if you think about it from the professional standpoint in the resiliency world, we have done so many things and made so many decisions and had so many challenges and change that we had to adapt to and be flexible. For example, the world going remote. You know, that was a big deal. And being able to embrace that a little bit, remain flexible. So you build these skills kind of in your resilience toolbox, and they're basic skills to not only cope, but to help you thrive and excel. So that's kind of how I would give a general synopsis of what it is.
So how about from a physical health standpoint, Anjua?
You know, for me, I would say this has to come from actually having a bit more empathy for ourselves. I think when they hear, you know, when we hear the memes and we see the memes and it's, you know, you've got to be resilient and this is how we're going to get through this. You know, we are the heart and hustle team. It's what I actually call my team, but there has to be heart in that hustle, right? So that heart means that we're listening, we're paying attention to when we actually have to acknowledge that we don't feel so great today. You know, I jokingly threw something up the other day. There's some days where, you know, just throwing your hair up in a bun and playing the gangster rap isn't going to pull you out of that deep funk. You know, you need something a little bit more, and it might just be that you have to let yourself be in the funk for a minute. So resilience to me is just acknowledging physically where you're at, knowing your body, knowing when your energy levels are low. If you're not someone who loves fitness, that's fine, but there's so many different ways physically that we could be taking care of ourselves during this time. And I really feel that if you didn't think about it before, you didn't think it was important before, I'm urging people to do so now. Not so that they can look any particular way, but that all of that energy that we put into our body, whether it's how we're fueling our body, whether it's taking long walks, whether it's finding meditation, something to help us now more than ever, this is the time to do it, because we don't know when this is going to ever be something that resembles anything we remember. It may not be. And if that's going to be the case, then we have to continue to be, buzzword, flexible. We have to be agile, and we have to be able to adapt. And part of that may be looking at things that you didn't think were important before, and taking them a bit more seriously now, so that you can build that resilience, so that we can just be prepared to energetically make solutions from a place of response and not reaction, right? So I think too, when we are not taking care of ourselves and our energy levels drop, the energy gets into this place that we call catabolic energy. And if you're in that place and you're physically not taking care of yourself and you're tired, or you're not eating well, or you are not listening to your mind and your body and taking the breaks that you need to take, you think you're just putting your head down and powering through, but what you actually are doing is creating more of a tunnel for you to have to create solutions from, because you have this stress kind of reaction going on, as opposed to taking care of ourselves, doing the things we need to do, noting when we are about to reach burnout, taking a step back so that our energy levels rise into that more anabolic state of energy, where we can now breathe, we can actually see broader and not so much tunnel vision, and make different kinds of decisions from that place. I mean, it just all goes hand in hand and hand in hand.
So Tracy, I want to actually come back to you kind of on the same question, but I want to talk about this definitely from a leadership perspective. Is, you know, many of us and many of the people on this call are in positions of leadership where they have to control things. And I think as leaders, and I think as humans in general, we like to be in control. Kind of what happens to us mentally when we're used to being in that situation, and all of a sudden that ability to control much of anything is kind of taken away from us?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it all kind of was taken away from us when you think through it, you know, and we're going to talk a little bit more later probably about this term that we all heard about, new normal, being used. So when that control is removed, what you have to do is step back, and you really want to respond to things rather than react to things. So you have to really analyze all of the things before you and just think through them, and breathe and say what is in my control and what is not in my control. One of the things that I know that I've talked about with many other people in this type of arena is, how many things we've had to implement, processes and protocols that we've put in place in a major corporate operational environment, and then how quickly those actually change. And that may have been based on things during the pandemic that may be new information or a new safety protocol or the way that the virus may have been spreading or what's good to do versus what is not good to do. Access to certain types of things, and has that whole, like, our supply chains closed down, or things that affect your business not operating smoothly. So, without getting too far into the weeds, but when you can't control any of those things, what you can control is what is before you that you are responsible for. And then you have to think about how you want to respond with that. So jumping ahead too far, looking for when the end is in sight, how long do I have to do this? Patience is key in all of this work that we're doing. It really is.
So, we've talked about this, about, nonprofits having a lot of stress on just a lot of levels. So, there's a lot of nonprofits that have had staffing cuts, they've had budget cuts. There's the demand for services in certain sectors is way up. Events have been canceled. Donors are being cautious in what they're giving right now. Federal and state support is, who knows, it's up for some people, not up for some people. Remote transition, as you mentioned, challenges with remote working. I mean, we saw this today with trying to put me getting on the webinar. Technology isn't always your friend. How can we sort through all of these things and still be a good leader, a good employee, a good spouse, a good parent, a good family member, a good friend, and all of those kinds of things? Tracy, I'll start with you.
Okay, that's a lot. That was a long list, Amy, and it sounds like a typical day here at Portage Path. Sort of what a typical day looked like from March on. But really, it's very much our reality going forward. And we are all combining a number of different roles, whether you're, in a large nonprofit sector, actually even for-profit sectors are kind of struggling with some of these things as well. But really, and I'll give you some recommendations and suggestions, and it sounds just like a laundry list of things that I may be saying everybody should do again. It's not the point. It's really, where can you see yourself fitting into some of these things and using them to relieve some stress, manage some anxiety, and realize that you may have very competing roles, but we all have a lot of different roles in our life. All of them have been affected by the pandemic. So it's hard for anybody to say their work life is not affected, their home life, their kids' life, a caregiving life, everything has been affected for everybody. So if you step back and really look, and sometimes it helps to try to compartmentalize, organize and prioritize each of these things each day. Sometimes it even just a half a day. Some days are going to go better than others. Some days you may start out with a grand plan or the night before of how you're going to organize and compartmentalize your day. And, that's shot by 7 a.m. So be kind and don't beat up yourself. Just try to get back in the saddle and do it again. But when you take small bits of things that have to be managed, you really do manage your stress better. So that's one type of suggestion. The other thing that I think is really beginning to affect people is the amount of information overload. We're going to put aside that there is an election. I guess I had to say it at some point today, but all of that information is sitting out there in the world that we're bombarded with. But also just information about everything. If you think about it, the federal government, there's PPP and there's CARES money and there's CURES money and there's money, and you better hurry up and get with your banker, and you better make sure you're doing it the right way. And then the rules change, and the rules change 50 times. And okay, well, what part of that information do you need right now? What do you need to know for the future to plan well for your company? But how do you manage all that? So I really encourage people to identify information that you need, prioritize that even, and be strategic about what you pursue and how you use that information. So it's really doing the best you can with those kinds of things. You know, and simple things we all know are healthy, like making one decision at a time, taking things, again, prioritizing what you need to do today, what maybe would not be the best decision that you need to make today that didn't come out right. What don't you have to do right now? Let's prioritize that so that you're not, again, overwhelmed with 10 decisions that all need to be made. Some of them can be made later in the week, even next month. Because again, the information changes so quickly. And then we all have a tendency to beat ourselves up because we may not have made the best decision because, of course, hindsight's 20/20, and you know, it's just hard to always be doing that. Another thing that I think is really important is to network maybe and communicate with people who are in the same space or a similar space to yours. And that may be a workspace, so people who share a similar type of job or have the same type of hardships right now, but also parents, if you want to talk about all those diverse roles. So people who have kids at home that they're trying to figure out all of their educational needs, people who have parents in long-term care facilities. So if you network and communicate with people who have challenges right now, there's support in that anyway, reaching out and finding some support in other people, as long as they tend to be on the positive side and somewhat realistic. But you know, you sometimes can share ideas. I've heard a lot of creativity coming out and how people are managing some of those things. So I think it's important both professionally and personally to communicate and network and reach out to some people who have a good impact on you, affect your life in a positive way. And I'm going to let Anjua talk about unplugging and trying to be healthy, getting away from, Zoom fatigue, in addition to some other things. I think that would be really great for maybe if you want to pick it up there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you, Tracy. I mean, everything you're pointing out is all part of it's self-care, essentially, is what we're talking about. And I think that word gets thrown around a lot. And I believe a lot of people think it has to do more so with taking nice, long, warm baths. And, you know, it's not just about, I mean, that's nice if you can do that too. But self-care is so much more than that. You know, it's setting boundaries. It's you know, relooking at how you did things and just saying, if that's not working any longer, what's a new way that's going to make me feel less stressed? I think it's really taking into consideration for some people for the first time, do they need a therapist now? Is it helpful to have somebody to speak to about those feelings? You know, as a life coach, I focus on where I'm taking you moving forward. But if you find that you are in those lower levels of energy, as Tracy said earlier, something that leads to a depression, that's time to maybe talk to somebody that could just help you manage those feelings. Because right now, you know, you will find it with other friends, you know, absolutely, you can find comfort there. And you'll also sometimes get pulled into their drama and low catabolic energy also. So I would say creating your new self-care routine would be something for me that I'd want to really impart to people. It's something that I've had to look at. What I did previously is no longer working for me now that I have the kids home all day long, and, you know, having to create boundaries there so that I can do my work and have a coaching client as they're having school in the background, and, you know, and then taking that time and saying, all right, it doesn't work anymore like this. So what do I move around? What can I shift so that I do have that time? I don't feel stressed. I'm not lashing out at them, or I'm creating, I think, time for myself to do whatever I need to do to connect with others. But those things are not selfish. I think people in nonprofit, I'm going to take a guess, are possibly people that are very motivated to give, to be a part of creating impact in others. And I think when you're someone who has that level of giving energy, you are typically the last person on your list that you think about taking care of. So with that in mind, this is actually the time where we should look at being the first person on the list. It does not mean you're going to be selfish. It means that you're going to recharge yourself so that you can continue to give back to your team, so that you can continue to help at home. You can continue to help in all those different roles that Tracy was speaking of. So it's just redirecting our mindset around it now. Like I'm telling you over and over again, and Tracy will tell you again, now is the time to take care of yourself so that you can stay resilient, so that you can recharge. The Zoom thing, I don't know if you can do much about that other than, if you don't need to be on a screen when you're not on calls, turn the Instagram off, I've taken the app off my phone before just so I'm not tempted, because it is like you just automatically will go to that app. And that counts as screen time, just like we tell our kids, right? It all counts as screen time. Definitely what we're feeding ourselves, the news, it's going to be the same. I promise you. It's the same story that'll be there this morning, that'll be there tomorrow night. If anything super major happens, someone will let you know. But it's not the right way to start your day. It really isn't. I can't tell people how different your morning will start if you don't start with the latest headlines and the negativity and the death and the this and the that. I mean, you're taking all of that energy with you into your day. So maybe it's not that, maybe it's starting with music, maybe it's starting with a podcast that's going to be about taking those thoughts and lifting them up, creating a different kind of routine for yourself.
So we have a question in the chat, and then I have another question for both of you. So the question is, how do you know, based on what you are feeling, how you're feeling, when you need a coach versus if you need to go to a therapist? Oh, you're muted.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, I'll start that one. I liked what Anjua said earlier, is she's coaching people and doing that critical component of really getting people on track with goals in life and helping them achieve their best and accomplish great things. That's such an important component. People who tend to be dealing with negative feelings, symptoms of more serious things that may be a mental health diagnosis over time, really need to seek professional help in terms of therapy, perhaps even medication management or something like that. So and good therapists will help you to understand when you need something that looks like life coaching, and life coaches are excellent at guiding you to, I think you need to talk with somebody about this in a different way. So it's really, I would say that it's a longer term issue where negative recurrent feelings, negative recurrent thoughts, things that burden you, that affect your life, and really hold you back from achieving and accomplishing happiness, joy, those types of things. In some true mental health diagnosis. Obviously, people who are, more severely mentally ill, it's almost in a little bit of a different category. But for everyday folks who are, experiencing some things, I think that may be some guidelines. Anything to add?
I think everything you said is right on point. And for me, when I'm sitting with someone, if I find that client keeps returning to something in the past, that's not my area of expertise. It's not an area that I'm going to unpack for them, because that's when they do need a professional to help them deal with things that they haven't come to terms with that are now surfacing as adults. Generally, if it's, if I'm working with a client who is not battling something like that to that degree, they can typically, with a perspective shift, begin to choose different things. But when that person really struggles to choose something differently, like they actually cannot do it, that's deeper. And that's not my department. And that's when I definitely have referred clients to, like, I have a group of mental health professionals that I will have, that I will say, you know what, I want you to speak to this person. And then once you and that person can really help you unpack that stuff and you feel like you're ready to now move forward, then you can come back to me and we'll talk about it. But that's really what it is. I think it's just, you know when you're in that place that you really cannot pull yourself out of.
Well, and can it also be that you may need one, the other, or both, depending on where you are in your life and in your career and things like that too, right?
Yeah. I have clients now that have me and their therapist. And, we kind of like a little bit, we'll share a little bit what happened at that session. So I understand that I'm not going to step on any toes and I'm aware of what they're working on. And then I leave that to the therapist and I'm like, well, here's what we'll work on moving forward. But yeah, absolutely. Lots of people do.
I agree, totally.
All right, and there's another question. Is a lot of us, we're talking about kind of day by day and things like that, and so a lot of us are thinking, what can I do now so that I can be better when this is over? And I've seen some articles on this. I know, Anjua, you and I talked about this, and I thought the article was interesting, but the way you framed it was different. It's not who you want to be after this is over. What do you want to be now? And I just think that was a really interesting way to frame that, because so many of us are like, okay, my house is going to be amazing now because, I have all this extra time at home. So I'm doing every home project known to man. So, I mean, how do we kind of get off of that hyper treadmill too?
I'm laughing because I literally was that person. I think 1/4 of my house got a total makeover and then I just lost interest. I would say, first of all, that it makes me cringe a little bit when I hear that. How do I be better? Only because I understand where the question is coming from, but I think it comes from a place of feeling that there's something wrong with us now. And the only thing that's wrong with us is that we just have never done this before, anything that's happening right now. So everything that we're experiencing, everything that, we're feeling is feeling, new and to many of us wrong, I think, because we're not, sure how we're supposed to be doing it, or we're reading things that are telling us we have to do it this way and we have to be resilient. We have to be this, that, and the other, and great leaders and, forge ahead. And if we're not doing that, then we must be failing at something. So there must be something better that we have to work towards. I'd love to gently shift that towards exactly stabilizing yourself now, creating who you want to be right now. And if you're saying that I want to be a more resilient person, I want to be someone who worries less about the future. I want to be someone who is going to be solution focused, someone who's going to be ready to lead my team, then let's get into doing that right now by just everything that Tracy and I have said, utilizing all this information and then finding out what works for you. But there's no waiting. There's no being better at the end. It's like that thing when people say, you're not broken. I really don't believe that. I don't believe any of us are broken. We're a little bruised, a little banged up, but not broken. So there's nothing to actually fix.
So the next question I want to go to Tracy, because this is something that you and Portage Path really work in this space. We're reading a lot about increases in addiction relapse. We're reading about more substance abuse. I just saw an article yesterday that, talked about alcohol and tobacco sales are kind of through the roof. Can you talk about just the effect on that, on us mentally, obviously, and how our mental state affects our tendencies toward substance abuse? Because, the joke is like, oh, I'm going to have, there's all sorts of shirts about wine and COVID and, all those other kinds of things. And you hear people talking also too about food. Food, people are starting to not just alcohol and drugs, but food as well.
Yeah, well, I'll address the food thing first. It was interesting. I heard probably a pretty witty but kind of bad comedian early on, right in March and April, talking about, we used to worry about the freshman 15 from college and who the bright person was that named this COVID-19 because they've gained the 19 pounds of COVID from being home all the time, which is really, there was some humor to it, but it's true. And people's routines and obviously some of their health behaviors and things, they're just maybe more Since they are home, those things are more accessible, and they're falling into this is comfort in some way. This is relieving some stress. And they've got some addictions that are problematic. You know, COVID, the whole pandemic really has had a significant impact on all of these issues. There are a lot of reports, a lot of studies. I won't quote them all. You can find them anywhere in the literature, talking about how people are using more substances. And those include, obviously, food we talked a little bit about, but alcohol, cocaine use is up, methamphetamine always again, increase in opioids, increase in smoking again, and vaping. Way back when they looked at, that's funny to say way back when in March, but they kind of immediately looked at some spikes that happened in March. And in those last 2 weeks of March, there was a 54% increase in the amount of alcohol sold nationally. I also heard that from a person who was a cashier at at a grocery store that I would often go to, who I've said hello to for years. And the person in front of me had several bottles of alcohol. The person behind me did, and she stopped and said to me, "This is so typical of a day for me." It was incredible. They had run out of the brown bags that they put the bottles of different things in because they had been moving so much alcohol off the shelves. But it's affecting our lives, and people are trying to cope to manage their feelings. And there's a number of different reasons and a bunch of different types of feelings that really lead to substance use, right? So we've talked about stress already. People have very heightened anxiety. It's very real for people. They worry about being sick, contracting the virus themselves, maybe how to manage that, or they're watching loved ones who have the virus, maybe even, tragically passing away from that. So they're numbing some of those feelings. People are dealing with grief of loss. And we could spend the next hour just doing a list of the losses that people feel from this pandemic, everything from individual freedoms to their jobs to a healthy environment, to personal time, to businesses, it goes on and on and on, the amount of loss. And people definitely medicate with sometimes illicit substances, sometimes alcohol, etc., sometimes food, to deal with those issues. So there's also feelings of social isolation, the physical distancing. There are people that have even reported in some of these articles I've been looking into in their studies, they're drinking more because they're bored, which is really interesting. People are not sleeping well. Anjua, you probably hear that from people as well. So these are all factors that typically are attached to substance abuse. And during uncertain times like this, those who either misuse or abuse alcohol or other drugs are particularly vulnerable. There's an awful lot of relapses. There's a lot of new presentations, and there's often co-occurring disorders. So, that is a specialty of Portage Path. We have very progressive dual diagnosis treatment and co-occurring treatment, and a lot of other places do as well. And I really encourage people to reach out and get some help if they are, they really see the levels of those substances affecting their lives so negatively.
So this is actually, I think, a good segue into one of our final questions before we get to some other questions in the chat box. But, how do we then create a healthy mental outlook in times of unknown, right? So, Anjua, you've alluded to the fact that, we can set goals, but, we never know what's going to happen, tomorrow and next week for sure, but how can we kind of have this general good, healthy mental outlook and physical outlook in times of unknown? So, Anjua, I'll start with you.
Something I practice with my clients is I always have them really get clear on what they value, what's important to them. And I don't mean just general, I mean really having a core set of values like you would with a company, but having your own core set of values. And the reason I want them to do that and to know their skills and to know their strengths really clearly is because oftentimes they don't realize how many times they've already overcome difficult situations in the past due to the things that they already have in place in who they are and what they believe in. So what I would say now is it's the same thing. It's just understanding that there is a level of acceptance we have to have that life is going to happen regardless of you making goals or plans or you having a vision. I laugh at the end of every year because I love seeing all the posts where people, and I don't laugh like cynically, but I just, it kind of makes me giggle because everybody's post is like, good riddance to this year. I can't wait for next. And I'm like, okay, but things are still happening next year. People are still going to get sick and people are still going to pass away and hearts will still be broken and, relationships will, break up and babies will be born and, people will get married. Things will continue to happen. It has nothing to do with the year. It really has nothing to do with the year. So all we can do is focus on exactly how we look at things, the perspective we have. And if we consistently think that, things are happening to us, if we consistently think that there has to be a meaning behind every single thing, which sometimes there is, and sometimes things just happen, I think that's when we start getting trapped into feeling victimized, as opposed to looking at how we can, control the one thing, which is how we see and how we think of things. So if we recognize that things are going to probably go crazy next year in some capacity at some point, and not living in a state of anxiety, but just in knowing that you've done it before. We already had one long year of craziness. We've done this. Next year we'll just, I kind of feel like we'll be pros next year with whatever gets thrown our way, because we've done so much this year. We've lost so many people. We've seen so many, emotional, big, global things happen that, next year, well, bring it on, let's go, because we've done it and we're here. And we are already resilient because we're making it to this point after everything we've been through. So take what you have experienced this year. What did you learn? Really ask yourself, really think about it. Don't beat yourself up if you didn't go write the great novel that you said you were going to do in the 3 months you were off or working from home, and just recognize that next year is going to bring what it's going to bring. You have you right now, everything that you've learned. You have all this information at your fingertips. You have choices that you can make, and let's move forward. Tracy, what do you say?
Of course, I agree with everything you're saying. It's so important I just wish so many people could hear you today and start tomorrow fresh with those types of thoughts. To kind of dovetail with this, we have no idea when things are going to end. I think my personal philosophy is there's not going to be a hard and fast line drawn in the sand somewhere that this side of the line it was pandemic and this side of the line is not pandemic. I mean, it will ease out and, who knows what's coming next. But this is very temporary. It doesn't feel temporary to people, but if you think about your lives, 2020, everybody is doing this already. I'm hearing it. I can't wait for 2020 to be over. So apparently there's magic in January 1st. No one told me about specifically. I didn't get that memo, but everybody can't wait for 2020 to happen or get over with. But so this is temporary, and I want to encourage people as much as they possibly can, live in the present. What's before you today? What do you have today that's great? What are we grateful for? Practice that gratitude, and think about making lists maybe. This is one of my newer thoughts. So if 2020 was so bad, and let's do both sides of this for Amy. So in the nonprofit professional leadership role, sit down and make a list. What did you do in 2020? People have got to find things that are enormously on the positive. We pivoted to telehealth overnight. We continued services. Many other people did similar things to that. So you're still up and functioning. You're trying to figure out if you got some supportive funding, what to do with that, or maybe where to go for some more. I mean, these are all positive things, right? And, some people may have lost their jobs, absolutely, but what were they able to accomplish during that time? So there's always things that you need to focus on that really, I think people will have long lists of some good things. There are tragedies, but as you said, they happened in 2019 and 2018, and they happened to people's lives. And, things things happen. But it's when you're in the state of pandemic. So now we have to live our life with masks. And, you know, for the first time ever, you can't go to the store when you want, or, you know, things are, you can't, this doesn't work the same way that it used to, or the list of that is endless as well. But things will settle at some point eventually. Let's not worry so much about what that's going to look like and building your new normal. There isn't a new normal. There's nothing, quote, normal about what you're doing. And also remember that everybody has variability. So what your life may look like right now, and if you look into other people's lives and it looks like they've mastered something, believe me, there's probably 6 things that they're wondering what they're going to do something about. And they look back at you and say, I wonder how you did that. So it's so uncertain. It's okay as long as people are safe and continuing to forge on and gathering information that's helpful, and really reflecting back on some of the things you did. I will tell you from my business here, from this company, we are going to do some things differently going forward that we would have never conceptualized had this not happened. So we're making lemonade out of some lemons, and it's a wonderful type of thought. So that's just, you know, my script going forward. And I think if people think about things that way, there's different opportunities. So you try again to stay positive, stay optimistic, and surround yourself with people who share those values with you.
Well, before we get to final thoughts, we do have a couple of questions from the chat and actually one comment. So I want to read the one comment first. So it's, and I'm not going to mention who the questions or comments come from, but a comment says, I so appreciate you all. I'm juggling work and caring for my parents, and I was beating myself up. So, you know, hopefully that everyone who has, you know, been listening to this discussion today realizes that, you know, we're all doing the best that we can, and that we need to just, you know, again, day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute, and just, you know, do the best we can and push our way through it. We do have a couple of questions, and then I do want to get some final thoughts for both of you as we're starting to run a little bit short on time. Can you talk a little bit about decision making and how to know the difference between making the right decision versus a decision based on reactions to the pandemic? That's a deep one.
Can you repeat
nice deflection,
that?
Anjua.
You go, Tracy, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Can you just repeat the middle part or repeat that for me?
Sure. The difference between decision making, the difference between making the right decision versus a decision based on just reactions to the pandemic.
Well, I don't know that they're mutually exclusive or inclusive. We always try to make right decisions, and I will tell you the decision-making process, I've mentioned it already. Information gather, breathe, pause. All you can do is make the best decision you can make with the information that's before you at the time. And you may look back on something in a week, in 20 years, and think, how did I ever do that? And you're making the decision based on what you have before you there. So that's that part. Decisions during this pandemic are very different. You know, again, though, you're still using you're applying the same principles. What is the information that's before you? What makes sense? What is the reality? You know, and you do the best you can with those things.
Mm-hmm. That was awesome. So I'm gonna slip in on there. I'm going to put on my entrepreneur hat for this one, all right? Because we had to make a lot of decisions very quickly in the last couple of months for Groove Ride. And I would say anytime we recognize a decision came from a reactive place, it was probably because we were fearful in the moment. So we felt fear, we felt scarcity, we make a decision. Generally, those decisions backfire on us. They don't pan out well, or they end up reaping no reward at all. And it's usually because there was fear, there was a panic, there was a feeling of desperation. And again, it goes back to that energy that I was talking about, that catabolic energy. You can feel it in your body, as opposed to breathing. As Tracy continuously says, this is so key. We do not breathe. We actually breathe enough, I think, just to get the sentence out. We don't consciously breathe, which is why when you come to yoga or a class like that, and you take your first deep inhale, sometimes people get dizzy because they don't normally breathe. So breath allows for space. Breath allows for you to calm your nervous system, which is going to allow for you to then think clearly in a different way, without that feeling of panic or that feeling of fear. Does it mean, again, I love it when Tracy said, you know, the decisions right now, you're doing the best you can, because even doing all that, you still have never made decisions in this climate before. So we don't know what's going to work during pandemic times. All we can do is try. So I think even going in with that, saying, well, I feel good about this decision. We've thought it through. We thought about what ultimately we're looking to have be the outcome. You know, we're looking to see what the consequence can be and what the wins will be for us. And then we just kind of push it out there. And then if it doesn't work, we just take the time to breathe and go, okay, that wasn't the route. Why? What could we do differently? I mean, just basically what we would do at any other time, you know, using all the skills we already have. You have these things already. I'm sure you do. And just recognizing you have to maybe apply them and maybe tweak them a little bit, but you have them and you've done this before. So we'll do it again.
Mm-hmm. All right, so as we wrap up, we have a couple minutes left. I'm gonna, final thoughts, except I wanna do this a little different. I'm gonna kind of tie it into the last question that we have from our audience. If you could kind of do a quick wrap up of maybe some things to take with people can take with them, but maybe 3 things they can do every day to help them cope with stress. Maybe they like to start.
Who? You want me to start?
Either way.
Okay. We're going to probably say this similar things. You need to breathe. You need to pause, and you need to think. Good thoughts, and do some self-talk that's very reassuring. So it is, you know, if you have to repeatedly tell yourself throughout the day you're doing the best you can, you know, you're making good decisions. You've evaluated the circumstances, you've sought counsel, and I don't necessarily mean attorneys, but you've sought people on your team, people you trust, people in your life personally. You know, you're doing the best you can with what you have, but you have to take care of your mental health. You have to take care of your physical health. They are intertwined. They always will be. And you can deny things as long as you want, but until you do that, you know, people, some of those things trip you up. All you need to do is try. And if you fall off the horse, you just get back in the saddle. Try again. Just try it again.
Every single thing Tracy said times 10. And then I will add empathy, more empathy for yourself, more empathy for the people around you, the people you work with. We don't all take in challenges the same way. I think, Amy, you said it before. We're all kind of having different years. I know some people who are saying this is the best year of their lives. So just, you're not doing it wrong if you're not that person, right? So having empathy. And then for your team, just recognizing if they're feeling stress and you are not, as the leader, you know, taking the time to understand how you can support them, you know, whatever that is, whether it's having, you know, more things like these coffee talks that Amy's arranged or whatever it is, but just taking that time to recognize that your team and their mental health matters, and how they're taking it in. They're not doing it wrong either if they're not doing it like you as the leader. I would say the other thing I wanted to point out, and Tracy mentioned this before, is just staying present to what's happening right now, especially when you start to feel that spiraling and that panicking. This is something I used with my clients a lot, is just what's happening right now. What do you know to be true right now? Because that's all we can control. And then I would just say the very last thing is your emotions are messengers, and I don't think we take that in enough. So we feel the emotion, and then we will want to do something like dull it, whether that's through drinking or eating or, you know, binging, some Netflix show for days and days and days, which is not a bad thing when done with a different kind of intention. But if we're avoiding, if we're hiding, if we're trying to bury those things, we're actually missing what the message may be. And the message may be that you need additional health support. The message may be that it's time to shift this routine. The message may be that, you're feeling anxious and, you maybe need to hear it's okay and find that person or the resource to help you feel okay about that. So not ignoring or feeling the need to dull or push away our emotions, but actually leaning in and listening a little closer to what that means for us and what we need.
Well, I think we could probably sit here and talk with both of you for a very long time, but we did promise everyone we were going to wrap up at 3 o'clock. So, Tracy and Anjua, thank you so much for the time that you have spent with us today. I'm actually going to put up a slide with both of their contact information right now. So if you would like to reach out to either of them, you can reach Tracy at Portage Path Behavioral Health at Yaeger, Yaeger at portagepath.org, and Anjua Maximo at info@anjuamaximo.com. So again, thank you so much, ladies. And we actually do have a couple upcoming events. We are going to continue our next 2 sessions on resilience with our November 17th session on resilience in communities. And that's actually going to talk about the importance of healthy communities and what that does and how that impacts us in the nonprofit sector. We will be announcing those panelists as we secure them. We're very close to doing that. And then December 15th, we're going to be focusing on resilience for nonprofit organizations. So what we'll be doing there is talking about how you as a nonprofit on the business side of things can really look at being a resilient organization and what are some things that you can do in terms of planning and even goal setting, even though we don't know what the future is going to hold, to have a resilient organization going forward. So again, Tracy and Anjua, thank you so much today, and thank you everybody for attending.
Thank you, Amy.
My pleasure. Thank you.